Court. They will weigh in on President Obama's plan to shield roughly 5 million illegal immigrants from deportation. The AP reporting that they will consider this. They will hear the case in April, according to this, and there's a decision expected to come down in June. Now, remember that the president basically claimed that he had prosecutorial discretion over immigration cases, but many argued that doing that collectively for 5 million people was not constitutional. He did all of this by executive action, but now the U.S. Supreme Court will decide whether or not that executive order is indeed constitutional, and this comes in the middle of an election year where immigration is one of the most heated issues that is on the docket.
All right, and it's not just immigration that he took a beating on yesterday. The other one was Fast and Furious. They decided, hey, you got to release this information. Who do you think you are with your executive orders? This is Francesco Abbruzzino. This is the Uncensored Report, with a goal to educate, inspire, and affect change out there. It's a one-man show. I do everything from the research to the filming, production, to the Scoop web pages, the Uncensored web pages, the Uncensored Scoop social media. Truly one-man show. It's all unedited, unscripted, so I fly by the seat of my pants. Basically, I pull up some stories and I run with them. If you haven't really making any money, could you imagine? I was just thinking this morning, could you imagine if I was dedicated 24 hours to doing this? Like yesterday, I worked 14 hours. Usually I get up 4, start working. I work till about 8 o'clock at night. And it's amazing. If I had dedicated all that time to the news and running this thing, how successful it could probably be, versus my medical consulting billing company that I run, in which pays the bills, because this doesn't pay a damn thing. Truly amazing. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Let's cover the local news first. Let's get rid of this thing. Let's cover some of the stuff that's on the Scoop national news. This was an interesting read, and it basically talks about fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and how a mother comes on and discusses raising a child that's been affected by that condition. FASD is the acronym, and how this 43-year-old daughter has a mental capacity of a first grader due to it. So interesting read. Check it out if you have the time. ISIS once again proved why these guys are lunatics, blowing up the oldest Christian monastery in Iraq. You see the before and after pictures. Again, just the atrocities they commit over there. A dead baby found in a freezer in Florida house after drama on the Key Bridge. Let's see. Massacre report. Globalists covering up the jihadist violence. Wayne Madison, excellent reporter out there. Works for a few agencies, and he just covers how the globalists, the governments, are out there covering up a lot of this jihad violence all throughout Europe and in the United States, for that matter. And unfortunately, look, only 259 people interested. I did just post it, but it's a shame. This one we're going to watch real quick. This is Leanne McAdoo, and she talks about Flint, and some interesting information came out of this interview. So let's pull it up and just take a quick listen. I should have had it ready. I forgot to do that. I'm slipping with age. Leanne McAdoo and her report. And the reason I wish I would have pulled it up is because my system I run to do the show takes so much bandwidth, and it usually takes a while to pull stuff up like this. And as you can see, I'm kind of wasting time here pulling it up. Let's go ahead and exit this screen, and while we're waiting on that, we'll cover some more stuff. Let's see. All right. And I can't even do this. Wow. That's how much bandwidth it's taken up. So we'll wait and see what happens here. Leanne McAdoo. Well, let me talk a little bit about it. They're talking about Flint. The governor's coming out. He's refusing to resign. This stuff's been going on for about 2 years. No action's been taken. These poor kids have been drinking lead-tainted water. It's leading to 87 people having Legionnaire's disease. The government finally took action once people started... Here we go.
President Obama has declared a federal emergency.
Oh, come on.
for Flint, Michigan, after a devastating man-made disaster was created by the state, leaving hundreds of thousands of residents there with contaminated drinking water. Now, all of this happened about 2 years ago when the city decided to switch the water supply from Detroit to the Flint River, which is a tributary that runs through the town, and it's notorious to its residents for its filth. Now, immediately following this switch, the residents were complaining about the taste, the odor, the appearance of the water, but state officials kept reassuring them the water was completely safe to drink and that there was nothing to worry about. But now we know that that was a dangerous lie. Researchers from Virginia Tech found that the water coming from the Flint River was 19 times more corrosive than the water coming from Detroit, but they weren't treating it with an anti-corrosive agent. More than half of the homes have pipelines made of lead, which means this corrosive water was now leaching the lead out of the pipes, and it was going into these people's homes for more than 18 months. Little segue here, this anti-corrosive agent would have cost the city about $100 a day. But instead, I guess they were able to find countless dollars to fluoridate the people's water. So to them, allegedly stopping cavities is more important than stopping brain damage. So 18 months later, in the fall of last year, researchers discovered that the amount of children with above average lead levels in their blood had doubled. Now, there is no safe level of lead in blood, but lead poisoning causes brain damage and other neurological health issues, and it's particularly damaging to developing children as well as fetuses. Now, the city said that they switched the water back to Detroit in October, but it was too late. The damage was already...
All right, so that's Leanne McAdoo, and you can see that interview on the Scoop National News. There's another 5 minutes to it. It's pretty interesting and how the impact it's had on the community there. So check it out. Definitely worth watching. Kurds are seizing a lot of territory, and this is in Syria. They're advancing, and the Turkish military is not going to be happy about it because they do not want the Kurds to have an autonomous state. They fought it when we went into Iraq. They fought the Kurds having their own area, which they finally were able to manage, but they couldn't deem it a statehood, if you want. They just went into certain areas of Turkey and killed about 450 Kurds that they call extremists. Others call them revolutionaries to fighting for freedom. They went in there when Kurds were seizing land in Syria. The Turkey military went in there and started bombing them, and the United States did nothing about it. So this should be interesting, and it's not something that the administration will like. Now let's take a listen to this. This surrounds that whole controversy regarding not enough blacks being nominated, and a call for the way they're going out and calling. It's almost like they're calling for affirmative action. So let's listen to Stacey Dash.
Segregation, and if we don't want segregation, then we need to get rid of channels like BET and the BET Awards and the Image Awards, where you're only awarded if you're black. If it were the other way around, we would be up in arms. It's a double standard. Just like there shouldn't be a Black History Month. You know, we're Americans, period. That's it.
We're Americans, period. Enough with the segregation, and let's just move forward. And I like what Stacey had to say there was some of the comments people put on there. Okay, they talked about the recession on that one. This is an interesting listen to this. It's on the site. Basically, it talks about how people try to survive on minimum wage at $8.05. This is in Florida, but this could be in any town, USA, and how they're trying to survive and through life on such low wages. So let's take a quick listen.
For the holidays.
Susan Stowe not only provides for herself, she also is helping raise her 2 grandchildren, 8-year-old David and 5-year-old Bella. A total of 4 people living on 1 minimum wage salary.
All right. I'm just hoping we can make this do. It's a little hard.
Right now in Florida, that minimum wage is $8.05 an hour. That's $322 a week, under $17,000 per year, and after tax, that's only $13,790. Taking out rent, that leaves only about a quarter of that low income for food, gas, clothing, and everything else you might need.
Trying to maintain transportation, for one, and the maintenance of the transportation. You know, things that you have to do or you can't do anything at all.
For inexpensive childcare, Stowe sends her grandkids to the Boys and Girls Club. And hot meals, those come from the Salvation Army.
You're going to eat half of it. You got to.
But other than the bare necessities, there's little room to give David and Bella much more.
The kids suffer because there's places they would like to.
All right, you can hear the rest of that on the Scoop National News. It's interesting on the impact that society's having with this whole minimum wage discussion. I'm not an advocate of raising it to 15 because I think what happens is you're going to see what Walmart's doing, closing 286 stores, laying off 10 to 16,000 individuals. I don't want to see that happen in society, but then my heart goes out to these individuals, and I know they cannot survive on $8.05 an hour, and I'm not sure what the solution is. That's why I'm not in politics. The politicians, I hope, figure it out. I got a few ideas, but I don't think they'll listen to me. Taliban attacked Pakistan University, killing 20 people. The 4 attackers were killed in the mayhem, and they're calling it a terrorist attack there, and it is indeed a terrorist attack. Wow, that woman just got missed by that car. Did you see that? Swedish woman films immigrant refugee demanding sex on the streets. You're not hearing too much about it out there, though. This is a car chase where the cops chased them down, and all their pit bulls got out of the car and started running, and they had to go up there and round them all up. This is in the Now, talking about the whole Ukraine and then the white Oscars. And let's see, glow in the dark hair, the newest beauty trend. I hope my daughters do not see that. Some fluff stories here. Here's a guy that he says his friend was beheaded for sorcery because he practiced acupuncture, which they deemed to be witchcraft. Again, this is proven why they are just moronic. This sick individual here, Phoenix police are investigating this. They had a 3-year-old malnourished girl duct taped, thrown in the closet, and offered for sex by men that babysat her. This guy deserves the death penalty. What is wrong with these idiots? And it wasn't just him, it's his wife too. I posted the story yesterday, but I saw it again. I just find it so offensive, I thought I'd put it up there again. Florida woman tells cops she didn't know how drugs got in her genitals. Of course, only in Florida. All right, refugees in Norway protest plans to deport them back to Russia. A fluff story here about an elephant and a dog. What do we have here? Oh, the brain-tingling algae lurks in our waters. People don't understand the impact of this, and I always get people that come on the attack, but it is. You see this constantly where people are inflicted with some kind of brain virus illness that impacts them negatively. I was inflicted by this basically when I surf flop twice on 2 occasions, 1 year after the other. I got sliced by a fin 1 year and the other year on a rock. I was in this water, this dirty, filthy, algae-ridden water, and it infected my foot. Next thing I know, I got a $10,000 bill. But it's horrific what that thing's doing. Community schools, I'm definitely going to touch on that. I tell you what, if you want to read an article, that's an article to read, and a concern you should have how government's coming in and wants to basically take over the parenting rights of your kids. Let's see, CNN was surprised by this, how they that they reported on the severe intel, which goes beyond secret, that they found in Hillary's personal server. Sorry, I smashed my lip today and cut it, and I think I can feel the blood again. Stadiums, Los Angeles is building theirs, $2 billion to develop it, and it's a cost that the city residents will bear. And I said, don't do it. As you all know, I'm not an advocate of them. It's a losing proposition. I put it on last week's show, where I think it was last week or the weekend before, where I talked about cities are just losing money. St. Louis, the one that hosted this team, still has not recouped the money, profits from the last stadium they built. They're still in a losing proposition there. Oil, we're going to touch on that and how it's impacting the markets. It was at 27 something. We'll check it out in a second. More issues with Flint and the lead exposure in the water there. Doctors choose end of life differently than the general population does. Program that helps veterans with PTSD, and you got a few of these. They help disabled kids here locally. We have one that helps the disabled kids. This is Trump and O'Reilly. Let's take a quick listen to it. Hold on one second. And they're discussing General Petraeus and what happened to him and why shouldn't that happen
that election, to be honest. But
you stay
Hillary
home.
shouldn't be allowed to be in the election because of emails, okay?
Hillary shouldn't be allowed.
Is a socialist. I don't think she should be allowed.
She's innocent until proven guilty.
What she did with the
though.
emails is criminal.
But she's innocent until proven guilty.
With the emails. Well, I think if she gets indicted, she will drop out of the race, because obviously if she's under indictment, she's not going to be running. And, you know, it's amazing that whether it's General Petraeus or many other people that have done about 2% of what she's done, and their lives have been destroyed. So I don't think she should be allowed. The other one, he's a socialist/communist. If you want to pay 90% in taxes, you vote for him.
Bernie, he's talking about Bernie there. George Petraeus, the one he referred to in this interview, essentially, they're looking at demoting him. He'll lose $170,000 a year if he gets demoted down to the last rank where he had a positive review. Not sure where the politics are coming in and who's trying to push that agenda. All right, let's see. Pennsylvania University considering dropping the Crusaders nickname. I put up there, you know, that this is the culture war. The Crusades came about because the Muslims were coming in and attacking Christians. Nobody's really paying attention to it, just Mike Weldon and about 572 others. The Pakistan incident, once again, Sarah Palin and her son allegedly punched, pointed a gun at his girlfriend. That's news because Sarah Palin has come out in support of Donald Trump. Yesterday, Iran decided they're going to build 2 nuclear plants. They don't care what the treaties or anybody else says. Tough luck. The Hammonds, we're not even going to talk about the Hammonds. Luther King, some idiots out here that they just don't know about Martin Luther King, and that they can't figure out that he's not really endorsing Trump. DHS, 500,000 people have overstayed their visas, and there's a breakdown on another site where these people are overstaying their visas and they're just walking around, no problem, nothing at all. And a lot of them do come from the Middle East. We're not talking about just Central America. Frozen man pulled out of the brink of death after 9 hours in sub-zero temperatures. I'm surprised he's still alive. California firefighter giving bare shoes to a barefoot homeless individual. That was great. Freed Iranians in the prison swap choose to stay in the United States versus going back to their country. What's that say for Iran? Bernie Sanders is coming up. He stomps Hillary in New Hampshire, 60% to 33%. This is going to be a surprise candidate. I'm telling you, I personally think it's going to be Bernie versus Trump for the presidency. They're politicians, and they're not politicians. They're running, they're politicians, but 2 that aren't your traditional politicians out there. And it should be interesting. One wants to tax the rich, give to the poor, socialists, communists, and then you got Don. All right, 2 girls fighting. Who's this guy? 16-year-old boy that's missing up in New York. This was just disgusting. This was last night. I don't even know if a lot of people looked at it. It's basically a Japanese guy that wants to come out and create lifelike child dolls for people. And they're facing a lot of outrage, rightfully so. It is engaging, and it's disgusting. Tasers for individuals now, and I was surprised to see that it's a self-defense weapon. A lot of concern with tasers, just with SROs in schools and the impact they have, and should they be allowed because of safety concerns. Al Sharpton getting into the whole Oscars thing. And I think that's running into a lot of yesterday's talk show stuff. So let's see, markets. The futures, because I got to do the show so I can upload it. Futures, still decidedly negative. We're down about, it looks like the market might open around 260. They're up from the lows, but it's still down. All this is coming from the drops in the oil and the China, Asian markets, Europe. Everybody is just taking a huge hit, and again, all because of the oil crash, and everybody's running scared. They don't know what to do. They weren't expecting it. They should have expected it, but they weren't expecting it. And this crash is similar to what we saw with the subprime mortgage rates. This time it's playing out, though. It's going to be a global financial crisis, even more severe, they're saying. And they say that it started last year, and ever since 2015, that we've had about 42 North American oil companies that have filed for bankruptcy. And that's 130,000 jobs that have been lost in the United States. And it's putting pressure on stuff like the junk bonds, the energy junk bonds out there. And what you're going to start seeing is a lot of pressure on the banks, because the banks are the ones that went out there and financed these. They're the ones with the loan exposure out there on the energy industry. And they're bracing for big, huge losses. And if you continue to see the price of gold, it was at 29 yesterday, it's at 27 and some change today. Over the past 18 months, it's been just dropping, and a lot of the recent drops are due to Iran saying we're going to put out about 500,000 barrels now with sanctions gone, worked it up to 1 million barrels. And, you know, the consumers are happy about it. They're thinking, well, we're saving money. We're excited. The average gallon of gasoline is down at $1.89. We saw it at 46 cents up in Michigan. But this oil crash is nothing to cheer about. You're seeing it at the tank, but you're not going to realize the impact that it's having, the backdoor impact, I'll call it. And what it is the banks. Let's just take the banks, okay? They're concerned. They had these boom years. They're out there. They're loaning money like crazy to the energy industry. They're making money. They got drilling projects everywhere. Now these oil firms are going belly up. I just mentioned, 42 of them, 43 of them. And 130,000 people out of jobs. And these banks like Wells Fargo has more than $17 billion in loans out there. And all they've set aside is just $1.2 billion to cover. That's what they have in reserves to cover any losses. Obviously not enough to cover $17 billion in losses. They're about 14.8 shy there. JP Morgan, they got about 124 million to cover with potential losses. Citicorp's too, they're another one, but there's all these banks out there. And so what's going to happen? You know, right now they're saying, oh, the damage is contained. They're telling the public that. The public's buying in on it. But didn't they, and you know, you got to reflect back to 2008, but didn't they tell us the same thing back then? Are we already seeing these bank stocks, Bank of Americas and stuff, they're getting hit hard? And that's because people are beginning to realize, hey, you guys are full crap. This is a bad deal. You got some bad loans out there. And, you know, perhaps if the price of oil were to shoot up to 50, they might salvage any losses that they were going to have. But unfortunately, that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. We got an oversupply of it. The biggest banks in the world are now projecting that the price of oil could soon fall even much lower. I think we had Morgan Stanley, they're calling $20 a barrel. Royal Bank of Scotland that said sell everything, all your investments. It's calling for $16 a barrel. Standard Chartered calling for $10 a barrel. And unfortunately, the truth of the matter is that the price of oil doesn't need to go down 1 penny more to have a catastrophic impact on our economic, our global financial markets. We're seeing it play out again today. If it just stays right there, you'll still see endless layoffs, bankruptcies, debt defaults, and we're already essentially experiencing a major disaster. But they keep telling us it's all right, and people believe it. I feel sorry for the smokesters that only listen to major media. They don't go out and they don't listen to me. They don't read some of my articles. One of the biggest problems, I think, with alternative media is they have these, like this one. Excellent article. They put a lot of information out there, a lot of accurate daily the sheeple. But people will look at the name of that paper and think, I'm not going to read that media. Daily Sheep? What the heck? And I think that's the one thing that turns a lot of people off. You know, if you put out information that's different than major media, they consider you a conspiracy theorist. InfoWars, I tell you what, I guarantee you that InfoWars is more accurate on the communication and information they're putting out than the majority of media outlets out there. And that's because this guy, Alex Jones, is under such scrutiny to get his information accurate and right. And I challenge anyone to find where he was wrong. Instead of just sitting there like many of the trolls do and say, conspiracy guy, you're a nut job. I challenge you, go out there and show me where he's been inaccurate. He has been wrong a couple times, but he comes on, he says, hey, I was wrong. We need to fix this. This is what it is. You'll never see major media do that, rarely. But back to this whole oil thing. And the banks, they're, like I said, they're teaming with these bad loans. And to be honest, the banks in the United States are better off than in Europe. And if the banks in the United States are doing this bad, what's that say about Europe and Asia? and the domino effect that this will have. And we're going to see this in the headlines soon when we have a full meltdown going on. And you don't know exactly when the explosion, this final meltdown, is going to happen, but it's going to start raging out of control, and people should be concerned. That cut's still bugging me. And that's not the only problem we have with the markets. We have, this the whole unemployment issue out there. I've talked about wages and the impacts on them, the shortage of hours, the quality of jobs. People have just given up looking, which conflicts with what this whole fallacy that Obama puts out there about his whole job creation and where it's at right now. And there's some surveys out there. Yeah, the candidates out there, they're saying that we've gained, there's strength out there in the numbers. The Democrats will say, look at the unemployment rate of 5%. Isn't that awesome? But you got to dig deeper into these numbers. You got to look beyond Obama sitting there and touting these reports about the U.S. economy. Has it generated over 14 million jobs? Yes. And is unemployment at 5%? Yes. But what about the labor force participation rate? It's been in a virtual free fall. If you look from 2010 on up, the percentage has dropped. It's gone from like almost 65% down to 62.5%. And you haven't seen this type of fall since the Carter days. And how, the question you have to ask is, how can the economy currently be producing a record number of jobs while the labor force participation rate continues to decline? There's a disparity there. And, you can look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics and their definition, which I pulled it up here, of a participation rate. And it says labor force participation rate is a percentage of the population that's either employed or unemployed, either working or actively seeking work. But there are some components that don't go into the calculation. And they don't look at the people with jobs are employed, people who are jobless looking for a job, and available to work for unemployed. The labor force is made of employed and the unemployed. People who neither employed or non-employed are not in the labor force. There's different variables out there that don't get factored in. And the U.S. employment rate cited by the U.S. government is a U3 employment, which is defined as the number of unemployed people as a percentage of labor force. And this article goes into all kinds of stuff, and it basically comes down and says, look, the numbers aren't really where the perceived numbers are at. The standard employment rate is extremely narrow calculation. It leaves out swaths of the population. And some of the primary factors out there is the weak economy. Although the economy is technically creating jobs, manufacturing and other highly paid industries have remained morbid. They're not around. And that leaves a large number of workers discouraged from the labor pool. You got young people that are entering the workforce later, with the percentage of individuals possess at least one advanced degrees rising about 25%. Disability and government assistance is increasing. We see that number out all the time. I think there's 8.8 million people that are on disability insurance. And that's essentially doubled in the last 20 years. Aging, we got the baby boomers out there. They're retiring. And our pool of employable workers in America is shrinking. And what all this is doing is it's becoming clear that besides that great an unemployment rate of 5%, the U.S. employment situation is far worse and in far worse shape than Obama and his administration would lead us all to believe. Just like I can't go on and on about the inflation. Is it really 1.5? And, is there a solution? I don't know. You got these bickering politicians out there. You got slow economic growth. You got low labor participation. There's not going to be a change anytime soon. And I think what we're going to see is when people go to the ballot box, they're going to try to let their votes count. But will they? And will we get a change? I don't know. Those are the questions. I did want to talk a little bit about Saudi Arabia too. I'm trying to think, when did I come on? I don't even know how long I've been talking for. About 30 minutes, I think. Okay. I wanted to talk a little bit about Saudi Arabia and our relationship with them and where it's going, where it should head, some of the concerns with it. And Saudi Arabia is essentially a totalitarian regime that has no legitimacy and no base out there, no base of support. And you might be wondering, well, how come they didn't go down when they had the Arab Spring out there if they don't? I'll tell you why. See, the Saudis are doing sort of what Saddam Hussein did. They're wrapping themselves all up in religion, around religion. And it's similar to what Assad's doing now in Syria. They're playing that old religious card. And the Saudis are using religion as their excuse now, labeling the recent mass executions of the Sunnis and the Shiites as a way of preserving their religion when there's actually a message to, it was actually sending a message to frighten the citizenry. And when you had that Arab Spring back in 2011, out of fear that they were going to lose grip of their citizens, the Saudi government allocated something like $35 billion in giveaways and services to the citizens of Saudi Arabia. And it was an inducement that succeeded in tampering down any rising up of angst, any revolution at the time. But all they really did was just defer their day of reckoning. And you can't quell the impulse to fight against a sense of injustice that's as strong as many people feel when they're in a police state like Saudi Arabia has, where there's obscene inequality. And that's what Saudi Arabia is facing now. You look at their executions. They executed 47 people since January 2nd. And it's barbaric, chopping off a guy's head in the center of the square. 158 last year. I think they said that was a record. And essentially they wanted to begin the year with a warning saying, look, we're in control here. We're not going to take anybody up that opposes the Saudi regime. And it was essentially a slap in the face to democracy. They're not a democracy, obviously. And what's surprising is most of the people that were executed were Sunnis, which is why Al-Qaeda and ISIS is so upset, because these Sunnis were executed. And they did that to frighten the overwhelming Sunni population, which is what Wahhabist Sunnis are there. At the same time, they included the Shiite clerk, this Al-Nimr, to send a warning over to the Shiite minority. But it also served to divert attention away from the world, about their cruel executions, to conflict between Shia and Sunni, and drag into it the whole Iran guilty party, because it's gotten Iran upset with how their Shiite clerk was killed and blah, blah, blah. We all know what's going on there. And the Iranians, they fell for the trap. They set their fire on Saudi's embassy on fire. They've gotten crazy. And it's starting to heat up there. Saudis closed their embassy in Tehran. Their allies are coming out showing support for the Saudi regime. But this whole Saudi effort to sustain the life of the regime is broad, it's profound. For decades, they spent billions of dollars on madrasas and mosques that spread Wahhabism. They funneled comparable sums to insurgents such as Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Al-Nusra, through their covert operations. They support those that are trying to throw over Assad in Syria. They're the ones in there militarily doing it. They're over there bombing the hell out of their Yemen because their puppet regime came under attack. They're using all these countries with their proxies in this proxy war against Iran. I mean, they're the main contributors to these civil wars in Syria and in Yemen. You hear a lot about Syria, you don't hear too much about Yemen. And neither has resulted from religious differences, but rather from the Saudis' efforts to fend off challenges to their regime. And we should be concerned about it. It's a dangerous path. Right now, Saudi Arabia's fortunes are receding with the price of oil. They spend about $1 billion a month, and they're not bringing that in anymore. And that's just on their invasion of Yemen. While their citizens are starting to suffer because the price of the oil has dropped so much. And they're trying to bolster their authority with these beheadings and sending a message. And, Obama, when he took office back in, 2008, he rejected past policies of supporting the non-democratic, corrupt, abusive regimes. And that whole Arab Spring brought hope. We had our hands in that whole mix. I mean, Egypt, we didn't do anything for Mubarak. But what Obama's finding is that it's difficult, this task, with the events that are occurring throughout the Middle East, to continually retreat from a policy of distancing yourself from the totalitarian regimes that are there. And I don't think the United States should blindly march lock, foot, and step with Saudi Arabia right off the cliff that they're heading for. And that's what a lot of people are concerned that we're starting to see. Who knows? Who knows what will come from it? I certainly don't know. All right, I wanted to talk about this community schools because I don't think people understand essentially what it means with them. And it came out, this is a Obama GOP legislation that they've unleashed out there. Community schools, and essentially the goal of these community schools is to replace the parents. Big Brother is coming for your kids. They're coming to take your kids away. And you got this mammoth bipartisan bill. It's called the Education Legislation, and it's Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA. ESSA. And what this is, folks, this is a radical expansion. It's a radical expansion of the statute that refers to the community schools. It's a controversial institution. It's essentially a parent replacement tool, parent replacement center, and they seek to overview every aspect of your child's life, ranging from when they're born all the way up to the end of their school careers, I guess you want to call it. They want to look at their mental health and their well-being, even their dentistry, to make sure that they are being parented per the government guidelines. And in this, Obama's out there calling the parents basically equal partners in raising their kids. When did the government become an equal partner in raising my daughters? I don't recall that. And, there's many unconstitutional provisions in this bill. And what this bill does is essentially turn the government schools into parents and parents into pariahs. And it's a shame. But I guarantee you most parents aren't aware of this bill, aren't aware of what's in the bill. I posted it on my website. I think I did it today or yesterday. And I think there were only 250 people who were interested in it. But then I put a lady up there that's had 15 kids upset that she's not getting her welfare checks or the amount that she wants. And that one's been seen like 80,000 times. I don't get it. Why aren't people concerned about this increasingly out of control, Uncle Sam? Both parties. I'm not just talking Democrats and or Republicans. Both parties. They want to raise our kids. And this whole statute, this education statute, which was passed by the GOP, cheerfully signed on as a miracle by Obama, it essentially means that the feds can plan to further undermine and attack the role of us as the parents with our kids. The implications of accelerating assaults on the families, parental rights, constitutionally limited government, future Americans' kids, future of the nations can't be overstated here, folks. But how many of you are aware of this bill? The community schools. The community schools are supposed to provide what the legislation refers to as a pipeline service. And this, I'm going to read what it is. The term pipeline service means a continuum of coordinated supports, services, and opportunities for children from birth through entry and success in post-secondary education and career attainment. And they say the services must include support in-home support, career counseling, social health, nutritional, mental health. It goes through it all. All it's missing is giving them a big old head before bedtime and from big brother out there. And the students aren't going to be the only target here either. There's a section in there that deals with promising neighborhoods. And it targets additional federal funded services, which the statute calls for targeting of everyone with these pipeline services. Bureaucrats, institutions, government schools funded through the scheme will be charged with providing social health, nutrition, mental health, and all that stuff. It's a government-run elementary school, secondary school that participates in a community-based effort to coordinate and integrate educational development, family, health, and other services. And while I'm alarmed, many parents might be alarmed, many voters might be alarmed over this scheme, the special interests are making out on this. The crony capitalists, the teachers' unions, the bureaucrats, the big government, they're all celebrating these developments. It's a good thing to them. But it's a bad thing to us. It's a bad thing to us. And apparently, no school bureaucrats believe that the job responsibility include usurping the role of families and parents at the raising of their own children. This full-service community school program encompasses more than just academics, folks. It ensures beyond inside the school buildings and into your home that these kids have the support that they want to give them. Big Labor's delighted because the role of schools and your rearing of the kids is expanding. The role of government is expanding. So they're elated by it. Elated that these community schools are increasingly usurping more and more control over the kids. And beyond community schools, this ESSA legislation targets Americans for government education at their early ages, when they're young. In preschool programs, federal preschool programs, again, probably entirely unconstitutional. They got massive funding for it. Also with this statute, they're calling for this 21st century community learning centers. And what they do is it's essentially a scheme to offer students a broad array of additional services, including counseling programs, health education, cultural programs, youth development activities. And it's meant to keep the children in government care outside of school hours. They provide funds for the activities before and after school for those activities. And even parents are supposed to be ensnared in this federal program through these community learning centers. They want to teach you parent skills. There's a parent skills program in there. Yet, have any of you ever heard of this? Community schools, basically, they mean that their school will be expanding and replacing the family. And church as a center for every child life. Churches too, folks. Offering a myriad of services. Do you want them dictating your child's mental health? And few things should alarm parents more than the prospect of the government assessing your child's mental health and proceeding to fix any issue that the government claims to have found. They'll have overriding authority over you. Is that something you want? And the broader ESSA legislation is also packed with references, like I said, to mental health. Essentially, government schools are now expected to seek out any child that's deemed to have some type of mental health problem. And even if the child's supposedly potential risk of someday developmental problems, they want to know about it. Teachers are expected to take training so that they can identify these patients or these children. They'll be regularly tested, and they'll look for trends in the mental health issue or industry. And despite being unconstitutional at every level, it's going to help Obama, the administration, the GOP, broaden their establishment with the goal of, with Obama, transforming America. And it'll be crucial as this legislation targets the minds of our kids through radical brainwashing and indoctrination programs. And Americans concerned about the future of their kids, their liberty, self-government, constitution, should resist this agenda and protect their kids. Withdrawing from government schools and replacing members of our Congress who have violated their oath to the office and the Constitution, foisting this ESSA program on America. That's where we got to start. We have to take action against this tyranny, folks, because a lot of people aren't. A lot of people are just blind to it. One other thing that I wanted to cover, which is along the whole school line, is this Scholastic Recall This Kid's Racial book. And it was pretty interesting. I did some research on it. Because there was a whole firestorm erupting. Because Scholastic came out. They came out with a book. It's called The Birthday Cake with George Washington. It's written by Romain Gainsbourg and illustrated by Vanessa Brantley Newton. And basically it features a slave that smiles a lot. He's baking cake with George Washington. The back of the cover is portrayed with George Washington and his enslaved chef, which is Hercules, and they're arm in arms like they're best buddies. I don't have a picture of it. But basically, the images that this book puts out is showing a happy enslaved African American working in the kitchen and serving cake. Basically, it closes with, "It's an honor and a privilege to serve you, sir. Happy birthday, Mr. President." But the story never tells the kids, or even hints at the kids, that it was not a privilege, nor were these African American slaves smiling. It was not a smiling affair to be enslaved. They don't realize that the conditions were so dire that Hercules escaped on Washington's birthday a year later. And they were so dire, he left his kids behind. He said, "I got to get the hell out of here." And this book had become highly problematic. Many viewed it as incomplete, even dishonest treatment of slavery. But that didn't get Scholastic to move. It wasn't until you saw this grassroots campaign, but it was just recently. It was over like a 4-day period. You had librarians, social justice organizations, Black Lives Matters activists, journalists, everybody out there saying, "Hey, you need to recall this book." Happened, like I said, over like a 4-day period. You had a petition out there. It was signed by thousands. Scholastic tried to launch damage control. They had the editor out there, the author out there. Finally, corporate offices came out, but the campaign continued to build. But finally, over the weekend, Scholastic said, "Hey, our reputation's at stake. We got to stop the distribution of this book." And so they ceased it and they stopped the distribution. And it's not the first time. They had another one in 2011, Rethinking Schools and the Campaign for Commercial-Free Childhood. They went on, they exposed that Scholastic's profitable and unethical partnership with American Co Foundation and how they were trying to promote clean curriculum to 4th graders. They had protests over that too, but nothing really came from that. And this whole protest over the George Washington book is part of a longer and larger campaign for kids to learn the truth about the history of the world today. That slaves were not happy. It wasn't a pleasant time. There remains a shocking lack of diversity in a lot of these kids' books. And I get that, and I understand that. This article came out and stated that in 2015, of 3,000 books published for kids 8 and above, only 32 were identified or written by African American authors. So I get that. It was a victory to force Scholastic to withdraw the book illustrations. And the activists and social justice and the scholars out there, they use social media effectively to counter master narratives that are out there. But there's a lot more work that needs to be done. It's an important milestone. It's an important victory. But the power of collective action must continue, and truth telling. There you go. There you have it. All right. I think that, let me see if I got anything that I could cover real quick here. You know what? I could cover this 13 hours. I think I got a couple documents I need to pull up here. And basically, this is a movie that was put out about the 4 dead Americans. And it was put out telling the version from the guys on the ground. It was the CIA operatives that were on the ground there in Benghazi. And it's a film with a recurring theme of a fading superpower that trades an still existing military power while trying to figure out its purpose. It depicts this man who was denied everything, yet gave up everything he had to protect his fellow Americans. So you got this 13 hours. It's the Secret Soldiers of Benghazi. And it's newly released. It just came out. It covers the September 11th, 2012 attacks on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi from the American fighters' perspective on the ground. These are the CIA operatives. And it doesn't directly attack Obama or Clinton in it, but it does show a lot of incompetence and corruption. It shows that our bureaucracy can be quite sluggish in D.C., and it shows that our guys on the ground went through having been abandoned by Obama and Clinton with the stand-down orders. And there were Benghazi, and this whole story basically illustrates a few failures out there. The failure to evacuate Benghazi when the threat increased, the failure to adequately protect and support these guys. They were like in just a basic little house out there, no protection at all. And the repeated lies that were told to the American public to minimize the nature of the jihadist threat, trying to blame it on that whole video that came out. And it just showed the scale of the administration's incompetence. And we've all known that the attack on Benghazi was not because of this YouTube video. But Obama and Clinton were out there. They lied. They blamed the video. They desperately wanted to cover up the administration's failures to recognize the escalation that was taking place there that led to this attack in Benghazi. And they also lied to secure Obama's re-election. Clinton, whose role with Benghazi, among other scandalous activities, should be disqualified from running for president. You know, we got the email too. But equally appalling here, folks, is that we had several Democratic politicians who have essentially accused our special forces of lying. The special forces in Benghazi of lying. And there's ample evidence out there through testimony, multiple testimonies, that there was a stand-down order. The CIA officer who was in charge of Benghazi, Bob, denies having given the order. But security operators interviewed by the authors of the book and everything else say, no, there was an order. It was given. You know, Clinton's too busy to watch it. She's not too busy to go on the Jim Fallon show. She's not too busy to go out and hang out with Ellen DeGeneres, but she's too busy to go out and see this movie. And she's not too busy. She doesn't want to see the truth. She doesn't want to hear about the truth. She wants to minimize the impact of this movie. And she wants to minimize it because the movie is negative on her in her campaign season. And it's not just her. It shows some policy challenges of the Republicans too. And 13 hours basically ends by knowing that Libya has become a failed state, a training ground for ISIS. A lot of that's due to Hillary's misjudgment in Libya campaign. And she's done it in a way that most Republicans haven't, because many of them favored the intervention there. Republican candidates had better be clear on their vision of foreign policy, folks. You got a lot of neocons out there that are aggressive, wanting war everywhere. They must make it known that whether the United States will or won't be in business of removing dictators. And it's turned into a messy business. You got Muammar Gaddafi, Mubarak, Hussein, Assad, all messy, all terrible. And, Obama's objective of removing Gaddafi, he He did it. Now we're finding out through emails because Gaddafi wanted to start his own currency with the gold and silver stockpile that he had and get off the French currency. French didn't like that, and that's what led to the attacks. It all came out in email, but you won't hear that. So we need to seize on this opportunity, folks. Seize on this opportunity. All right, this has been, I think I'm pretty much near 1 hour. And this has been Francesco Abbruzzino. This is the Uncensored Report. Remember to go to my website, click on longevity at the top or the banner on the side, and get yourself some minerals and vitamins so that you can be healthy like bull. Healthy like bull. And visit my site. Spread the word. Share my page, The Scoop National News. This has been Francesco Abbruzzino. I will see you tomorrow.